As children, many of us wanted to become policemen, firemen, sailors, and astronauts. At least that's the stereotype most people have, and it's quite common in pop culture. And if I have no special claims to the first three, the last one is worth thinking about a little more closely. I'm sure that every person of any reasonable age has thought about space, about the unreal scale of the universe, its fundamental nature, and the meaning of existence. Many, I think, have noticed the beauty of cosmic objects. Comets, stars, even entire galaxies, northern lights, starlight in the night sky, even just interesting and surprising facts about the cosmos. All this is undoubtedly gorgeous. Even in ancient times, people noticed the beauties in the sky. They gave names to the stars and constellations. They always tried to look farther, deeper into the cosmos. But not so long ago, I began to think about the other side. It occurred to me how scary the subject of space could be. No, seriously. Have you never been intimidated by the endless, impenetrable darkness that fills over 95% of everything that exists in reality? Have you ever wondered about the size of stars that, with their gravity, could turn the entire solar system to rubble? What's more, have you thought about the size of our solar system itself, time, and space? Some have, and the thought is terrifying. I'm not an emotional person, and I'm not very imaginative, so I can't say I completely relate to them, but I can understand them very easily. This video is not about little things like arachno or trypophobia, with all due respect to the owners of those phobias. We will not talk about gigantism, megalophobia, although it has a close relation to this topic. As it is clear from the name, we will discuss astrophobia, and I think that this phobia is much more interesting than the others, and it's different from all of them. I'm not just talking about fundamentals. Personally, I think that every person with a brain and time to think can come up with astrophobia or thoughts close to it. Unlike many other fears, this one can be inherent in absolutely anyone who thinks about space hard enough. I will even make a bold statement that astrophobia is much more fundamental than the fear of death inherent in all people. Well, I'll explain for that, as usual. Let's start at the beginning. We will move from the most obvious little things to the most frightening, at least for me, and not so conspicuous things. What immediately comes to mind when you think of scary things in space? Well, for some, it may be aliens, but for me, it's the dark. Fear of the dark is understandable to every human being, and is perhaps fundamental in the development of personality. I think any of us was afraid of the dark as children, and now, as adults, we still treat it with distrust. This is the memory of hundreds of generations of ancestors. This fear is rooted very, very deeply in the human consciousness. To describe in detail here, I think, is not really necessary. Almost everything in space is in darkness, and since the cosmos is everything that exists, it turns out that most of reality, most of everything is in darkness, and mankind is inherently afraid of it. So that's the very first creepy association that I have when I talk about space. And I wouldn't say it's the most frightening thing that the vastness of reality contains. There are other, more obvious things, and bigger things. I'm talking about planets. Let's start with the very first one, Earth. I was just talking about the big obvious things, but our planet is actually a small ball in the back of the near-infinite universe, home to all of us. All the people who have ever been born, and all those who have died, and those who will live someday. Probably every single one of us has spent all of our allotted time right here. And this little thing, this little piece of junk, is so small compared to the sun, let alone the bigger stars, of which there are plenty. I don't know what to say about Earth without mocking it. You see, when you consider the size of the planet, we're only alive by an unrealistic coincidence. There are so many things and phenomena in the universe that can wipe out all life on a planet in an instant that it's impossible to even count. Meteorites are just one more thing, although there are more than enough of them. The gravitational forces can destroy our planet with no problem. Temperature changes, ozone problems. And that's nothing compared to gamma-ray bursts. Energy bursts in outer space so powerful that a single one in our galaxy would be enough to wipe out all life on Earth. Yes, and it's not surprising, because this phenomenon releases as much energy in a second as the sun would produce in a dozen billion years of glow. Let's take the moderate case of an energy release of 10 to the 52nd degree Erk and a distance to the burst of 3 parsecs, or 10 light years. There are a dozen stars within that distance. At that distance, every square centimeter of a planet in the path of gamma quanta will emit 10 to the 13th power of Erk in a matter of seconds. That's the equivalent of an atomic bomb exploding in every hectare of sky. What else is there to add? Given the vastness of the universe, I can only marvel that we're still alive. But let's move on from our planet to other, much bigger ones. As I said, our Earth is a very small planet. Even in our own solar system, there's Jupiter. It's a huge giant, which, by the way, terrifies a lot of astrophobic people. In a big red spot, and this is a square like this, could fit our entire planet. And here's where things start to get really scary. Just imagine the size of that. No, really, try to imagine the size. Just imagine that the Earth is very close to Jupiter. You look up at the sky, and there's a huge spot taking up all the space. That thing could eat all of us. But the big red spot is only part of Jupiter. Jupiter is only part of the solar system. Have you heard of the star Stephenson 2-18? It's so huge the sun would look like a dot next to it. Its size is something that would make even me shudder. Even Stephenson is far from the largest object in the universe. But even that star is enough to admit defeat, to give up and give up trying to imagine such a scale at all. Often videos about space operate on size and distance. I don't think that makes much sense. At the end of the day, after all, what's the difference between 1 and 2 light years, and 1 in 1,000? The only thing that's clear here is that it's a very, very large number. But even 1 light year is too great a distance to be imagined. In space, the scales vary in thousands and thousands of light years. Sometimes they are counted in parsecs. What do these numbers even mean? It's impossible to understand. When describing space objects, you can use words like enormous, colossal, titanic, and so on. But they wouldn't be, shall we say, quite true, though even rather not true at all. There are no words in human language to express such scales. But among large objects, 2 things personally pierce me. These are voids and black holes. Voids, aka cosmic hollows. These are areas, however, I think from the name and so, clear hundreds of millions of light years with very little matter. Fear of voids is a kind of extreme case of the fear of loneliness. In space in general, everything can be pushed to the limit. Thalassophobia, for example. Somewhere out there, in distant and not so distant galaxies, there is a huge number of planets completely covered with water, and depths of hundreds of kilometers wouldn't be the most surprising or scary thing. In space, however, there is also the absolute of danger, destruction, and death. That's black holes, of course. A really strange thing, and as it seems to me, characterized by multi-dimensional aspects that can be frightening. The first is the appearance, a point of absolute emptiness, sucking in everything around it. It doesn't care what it eats, be it stars, planets, gas, or even light. But it can only be called a point when viewed from Earth. Let's move straight on to the record holders of black holes. The largest is TON 618. Its size is so large that in its diameter, can fit a little more than 32 solar systems, placed next to each other. Its mass goes into the tens of billions of solar masses. I'll never be able to fully visualize it, but I tried. A huge black mirror, so big that if I had an eye the size of our solar system, I'd still see nothing but emptiness, nothing but the event horizon, a singularity, gigantic, huge, enormous, colossal, immense. All these words do not express even 1,000th of the true size of this monstrous thing. This thing could shrink hundreds of solar systems at once, turning not just human civilization. Not just human civilization, but anything that has anything to do with Earth. And yes, humans can die in a huge number of ways, most of which would be extremely painful. But one of them strikes me as particularly horrible. I'm talking about falling into a black hole, not a regular black hole which would tear your body apart almost immediately. We're talking about a supermassive black hole. There's a theory that if you fall into a black hole, time slows down so much that it takes several hours to die, in a matter of hours. But by the time less than a day has passed, the universe will have completed its life cycle. Yes, the time warp will be so incredible that in this black hole, you will outlive perhaps not only the Earth and the Sun, and not only the Milky Way, but the entire material universe. A terrifying death. Frightening not because of the unknown or pain, but because of something simply unnatural. In addition, of course, in black holes, we are frightened by their mystery. Very little is known about these phenomena, and the situation is unlikely to change in the near future. The theories around black holes, but unfortunately it's impossible to test them at the moment. Another thing that causes perhaps the most objective fear is the hostility of the environment. If even our planet, our home, the forces of the cosmos, can destroy a human being without even noticing. The absolute majority of planets are not only uninhabitable, they would destroy a human being in seconds. Poisonous atmosphere, high gravity, high or low temperatures. These are just some of the many factors. Sometimes the methods of extermination can be astonishing in their sophistication. I think many who are interested in the subject of space know of planets where there are storms of glass shards. There are places so cold that we would be turned into ice cream in a millisecond, where we would be vaporized completely in even less time. I'm not talking about trivial things like radiation. And that's just the stuff about planets, gas giants, nebulae, stars, pulsars. It all looks even less like the semblance of something suitable for living. There's something else. For many people, I think this is the most obvious aspect of astrophobia. But it's a thought that doesn't immediately occur to me. I'm talking about aliens. But gray or green men and flying saucers, of course, scare anyone these days. I'm talking about real possible aliens. This is probably the topic that makes the imagination work to the fullest. Although the mass media usually doesn't go beyond humanoids and anthropomorphic insects, animals, or fish. But why do we think they will look like this? Who's to say it's not a living nebula, a living planet, an abstract cosmic mind, or some dust spreading across the universe? Could it be amorphous, huge monsters? Maybe a Type 4 civilization? Perhaps they are fourth-dimensional, living in other universes? Who knows? Maybe they are our creators who look at us as bacteria. We can speculate forever, but it's unlikely that any of the speculations will be close enough to the truth. That's why it's funnier to see attempts to contact an unearthly civilization. I think a lot of people have heard of the Voyager and Pioneer gold plates. The Pioneer plates depict a man, a woman, and the ship Pioneer in one scale. To the left of them is a picture of the sun. Rays show the location and distance to the 14 nearest pulsars and the center of the galaxy. The number system is binary. The unit symbol is a vertical dash. The hyphen is the symbol for zero. And, it's not for nothing that these attempts have been criticized as too anthropocentric. The fact that the direction is shown by an arrow is enough. Who other than humans should understand what that means is decidedly unclear. Voyager's records are already far more advanced. There's more information encrypted, and it's done using common cosmic phenomena, values, frequencies, you name it. But what if the aliens don't think in those terms at all? What if they just feel what they need to do without thinking in terms of numbers? What if they perceive music as a threat? What if the pictures we send them kill them? What unpredictable effects could that have? Let's take an easier one. They will take our peace-loving impulses positively, but destroy us in the process, freeing us from life's attacks. Let's assume more complicated. The aliens are so advanced that we take their actions as natural phenomena. There are variations in which those very same aliens will never make contact. They'll be too busy living in a perfect virtual world. Anyway, I won't stretch the video any further with examples, for that is not the main point. I could sit and go through the options for years, but what's the point? I just wanted to make the point that our ideas of extraterrestrial civilization are very far from reality. And we may very well never know their capabilities, their thoughts if there are any, nor will we know their physical form, if any. Unknowable. How many times over the video I've addressed what cannot be cognized. This is it. The scariest thing in the universe. The impossibility of knowing. And yes, you could say that many things just seem unknowable, like black holes. Many things just don't seem to fit in the human brain, like the size of stars. Realizing the size of the cosmos will probably be possible in the future, provided our brains are pumped. I'm confident that this will be accomplished sooner or later by bioengineering or implants. I don't know whether such creatures can be called humans in the usual sense, but they will be much better at cognition of the world around them. But even for them, there will be objective boundaries of cognition. I'm talking about the event horizon. I think many of us have heard of the theory of the heat death of the universe. In brief, contrary to many assumptions, it's possible to travel faster than the speed of light, to transmit information faster. So, according to the heat death theory, if the universe continues to expand at an accelerated rate, then in a few billion years, galaxies will move apart from each other. Then systems, stars, planets, and eventually atoms. They will move so fast and so far apart that you will not be able to physically move from one galaxy to another, for example. They will move away from each other faster than the speed of light. You're never going to get bits of information from objects that are moving away so fast. All causality will be lost forever, And there are already a huge number of galaxies that we will never know because they are too far away and flying away from us too fast. And, I believe that one day humans will take a fundamental step forward. Somehow the brain will be improved, and the smarter it gets, the easier it will be to improve it. So, exponentially. I think you get the idea. So, perhaps when people will create computing machines the size of a star, when they themselves will be smart enough to keep in memory all the sciences and all the history of the Earth, even in childhood, they will be able to change everything, including fundamental physical laws. Perhaps they will be able to break them so much that FTL travel will become real. But I'm getting distracted. Even if we don't think about such distant things as the heat death of the universe, what we're seeing now with telescopes is the past. Light is too slow a thing to transmit information when it comes to cosmic scales. And I think that's the scariest thing about the cosmos. We're unlikely to ever know even 1/100th of everything that exists. And that's the scariest thing that can happen to a human being. Some impenetrable barrier, the mystery of the world. After all, curiosity in most cases overcomes even the fear of death. So, what could be worse? What could be worse than a curiosity that can never be quenched? For humanity, I find it too hard to imagine anything more frightening. That's why I consider astrophobia to be the most monumental fear for all of humanity, and most likely for whoever will exist after modern man.